Right. Hey everybody, we're just going to give folks a few more minutes to join in here, but thanks for joining Aaron and I today. We do have the chat and the Q&A open as well, so like as we go forward in the webinar here, if you've got things you just want to chat about, throw them in the chat. If you've got questions, put them in the Q&A, and we'll do our best to keep up with what's happening. We'll just give folks a few more minutes. I saw Jared asking some questions in the chat. Where's everyone calling in from? I'm in Massachusetts. Where are you coming from, Aaron?
I'm in Denver, Colorado.
Oh, nice. Mile High City.
Finally warming up a little bit too.
Nice. We're supposed to get a heat wave next week, so right now it's pretty comfortable spring weather in New England, but that's gonna change pretty quickly here. Oh, nice. We've got someone from Connecticut, next door neighbor.
There's Ohio. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So what do you think? Should we get going? I know we've got I think the numbers are kind of slowing down here, so we can probably get into it.
Sounds good to me. Hey, we got people coming in from all over the place. That's great.
All right. Yeah, so get into it. I'll let you introduce yourself first, Aaron.
Yeah, I appreciate everyone's time joining us today. I'm Aaron Goldstein. I'm VP of Incident Response here at Total. I've got about 15 years of digital forensics and incident response background, helping organizations of all sizes respond to what is typically the worst day of their professional lives and helping them recover and respond to those. And then more recently, I've been building out security operations teams and helping build teams to defend and prevent those types of incidents.
Awesome. Great. I'm Brian Milbier, Vice President of Information Security and Compliance here at CyberQP. I've been here for about 2 years. Prior to this, I was at Datto, and I was also at a company called Elastic for a bit, and then I worked for some big financial companies before that. I've been doing cybersecurity for almost 20 years now. Not to date myself here, but I've done everything from security engineering, data leakage protection, incident response, built out a few SOCs, threat intelligence, you name it. So I've been lucky enough to get a good exposure across a lot of different security disciplines. Cool. So, um, yeah, so I mean, what kicked this off was I was at Right Up Boom, talking to attending the show for CyberQP, and as I was there, since I'm not on the sales team, I got to attend a bunch of the different sessions during the show. So I was sitting in on one of Aaron's sessions where he was talking about tradecraft and what the bad guys do and helping educate MSPs. And I was like, this is great. Like, you don't see a lot of content like this where it's not just pure sales pitch. It's really helping people understand what the threat landscape looks like. So I kind of hunted Aaron down after the show or after his presentation over at his booth, and I was like, hey, like just wanted to give you kudos for having a great presentation, helping educate folks, and we got to chatting, and it evolved into this webinar basically. Right?
Yeah, and it was good. And I think the idea is that we can all get together and even from different organizations and talk about these threats and raise awareness about the reality of the situation and how we all have to be responsible for securing ourselves and sometimes our customers as well. And so, yeah, it's great to get together and kind of talk through some of this with you. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. Yeah, you too. I mean, I'm excited to get into it. It's always good talking to someone with the experience like you do and be able to bounce things back and forth. So I'm looking forward to presenting this, and hopefully the folks on the call here can learn about cybersecurity from our experience and hopefully get a different view on things than they're used to. Awesome. Um, so we're gonna try to flow through this here. Just I think the idea is helping everybody on the call kind of understand what makes a complete cybersecurity program, how to really build a program. So it's going to be pretty high level, but feel free to ask questions or chat as we're going through here. Give us feedback, but um, we wanted to start off by just helping people understand what defense in depth means. I know it's a term that's been around for 10 years or more here, but I think a lot of people get caught up in a lot of marketing stuff, right? It's really the loudest voice in the space is the one that's reaching out to you saying, hey, go come buy our product. But honestly, a lot of it starts by figuring out what business your business is and what you need to protect. Um, so we've got an image here from the Canadian Center for Cybersecurity. They've got a nice publication where they provided this visual that shows the different layers of defense and what you should really be thinking about. I know a lot of people, when you ask them, do you have a cybersecurity program? They jump straight to number 7 there, where they're like, I have an EDR deployed, right? But there's a lot more that goes into it. Um, so what are your thoughts, Aaron? Have you run into the same thing where when you talk to people, you see like they're really focused on marketing and not necessarily understanding like how to layer up those defenses?
Yeah, Brian, I have this conversation a lot with, organizations. And yeah, like you said, some are like, oh, we're good. We have EDR. We check that box and we're done. And depending on who's in the room when I say this, sometimes I get the side eye a little bit. But, the way I like to think about it is the reality is most tools and technology can be effective, but there can be failures. Every security tool out there does what it's supposed to do, hopefully. But there are ways around it. There is always a loophole. There's always a bug or an exploit. Something can happen. And the idea with that is, we need to be building defense in depth and have more than one control that can cover these types of things. And so, with that, having EDR, absolutely great. I know we'll talk more about malware and those features and functionality, but it goes way beyond that. Part of when I was talking at Write a Boom, I was, you can't defend against or respond to something you have no visibility in. So, being able to monitor and see those logs and get alerts and activity as it's happening, and then working your way all the way up through those defense levels that are listed here. The idea is we want to have multiple tools and technologies in place to better understand what's happening in our environments, to respond to potential threats or suspicious activity, as well as the quick ability to communicate with others in our company about those types of issues. Because when things do get really hectic and when there is a high severity incident, you need to know that your teams can work together quickly and respond using everything all your resources possible.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think you said it well there, where it's really it's layering things up, right? Like you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. So if you're relying on endpoint security as your end all be all, there's the bad guys, it's that old adage, they only have to be right once and we have to be right every time. So having those layers and setting up tripwires along the way, basically, right? So like as they're going through, you've got those multiple places you can catch them, whether it's at your network layer, whether it's at the on the end user's identity. We've got all these SaaS tools we're using. A lot of people don't even think about monitoring there. Your endpoint security is not going to help protect your SaaS environment. And then a lot of people too, like that first line of defense, everybody hates it, right? Like everybody looks at it and they're like compliance, policies, like, oh, they just go through and check those boxes. But like in my career, I've always gone about looking at that compliance as like, if I'm going to go through the effort of building policies and collecting evidence and doing all this work to do an audit, I'm not just doing it to check a box. Like it's got to add value to my business, and be worth my time. So, this is one area where like it's not my favorite area, but it is something where it does help you. Most of the security frameworks that you're looking at, whether it's SOC 2 or PCI or whatever you're looking at, CMMC, all the different frameworks, the intent of them really is to make sure that you're not becoming blind to where you're comfortable, right? Like if you're really strong on the endpoint side, if you're really strong on the network side, if you're really strong on the identity side, right? Like a lot of people will put a lot of effort and time into strengthening that area of their security program because it's where they're comfortable. But I feel like these compliance frameworks really force you to look at it more broadly and make sure you don't have blind spots based on that bias that you're coming in with.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm also of the opinion where policy and procedure is not my favorite thing in the world. But, like you said, if you're going to do it, you might as well do it right. And, having responded to incidents for, a lot of organizations, I'd say a good chunk of them, you get in there and they have no IR plan. They have no real, plan at all. It's, panic mode. But the ones that do have it, you notice that they are able to respond and adapt faster and save time and money and things like that. And, the other thing I'd really like to see more, small and medium businesses and MSPs start to adopt is rather than picking these point solutions and say, oh, I need EDR, I need, this or a firewall. I'd really like to see more of an adoption of these cybersecurity frameworks for that exact reason you said is that, it's going to highlight areas where, yeah, it may not be as, enticing to you because that may not be the thing you like to do, but it's equally important and, can raise awareness around potential blind spots if one person is just implementing things as they read news articles. So yeah, definitely a really important to adopt a framework, whatever framework might work best for your organization, and kind of go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree completely. I think we've got another slide here. If we slide forward where we show some of the I grabbed this from the internet. It was from the CISO over at Jupiter One presented this at RSA back in 2022. So just giving him credit for this slide here, but this is showing NIST, like kind of aligning the NIST framework up with right of boom versus left of boom. And it goes back to what you were saying, right? Like that right of boom stuff is critical, making sure you've got your IR plan, making sure you're ready to respond and it's practiced. It's not just like a boilerplate thing you pulled out of your GRC tool, but it's like something that you've actually like made sure is modified and works for your organization and you've exercised it, even if it's just the tabletop. But I think a lot of folks don't really look at that the left side of boom, right? Like they're doing a lot of effort in like I'm going to buy an EDR or an XDR or whatever acronym DR and they're missing some basic security controls. So you're spending all this time and effort and money, but maybe you don't have any controls on your SaaS tools, or maybe you don't have any network controls in place, or like there's or you're not hardening your endpoints, or you're not making sure you're doing least privilege on your identities, or doing strong phish resistant MFA, right? Like there's so many basic things that you can implement that'll protect your business. I feel like a lot of that stuff gets overlooked, especially with a lot of the marketing hype that's out there today.
Agreed. And I think when you're looking at tools and platforms and technology that can make it easier for you to secure your organization or your customers, it's important to know that, or it's important to evaluate tools that can provide that, operational awareness and in that pre-event or left of boom capability as well. Having those, malware detection alerts is great and absolutely useful. Don't get me wrong, but being able to get a current state of your network or of an organization, and where their operational issues are or where their security configurations might need attention before there's that incident is super critical. So tools like CyberQP and platforms like Total, we can really provide a level of information and visibility into beyond just an alert or beyond just that security threat, but help you kind of step out from the day to day and see the bigger picture.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think when I talk to folks, when I jump on calls with partners or prospects, a lot of times, we're talking about the we talk about the whole, just in time access on our side of things. Like that's one of our capabilities is we've got this passwordless just in time where we can like really limit the attack surface for the attacks. But like there's a basic feature that we have in our QGuard product, which is discovery, where it's just like, and a lot of people glaze right over that, not realizing how important it is, where you can sit there and you can connect it up and say, okay, what do I have for privileged accounts that exist across my environment or my customer's environment, right? Like a lot of people get these malware alerts and they're going in there and taking action in their EDR, but they're not rotating credentials that are on the host, or they're not, there's like 20 used accounts that are sitting on the host with privileges that aren't being used, that are just sitting there waiting for a bad guy to take them and go use them. And it's basic hygiene stuff that really saves the day in a lot of these cases, is making sure, if you acquired a customer from an old MSP, are you sure that all of their privileged accounts are removed out of your customer system? Or if you have a tech that leaves, are you rotating those passwords? Are you performing cleanup? Are you using a shared account where like you don't even know who's doing what? So like if you're using a monitoring tool, or if you're responding to an incident, like trying to decode who was using that account. Is it malicious? Is it not malicious? What has the bad guy gotten access to? Like a lot of things like that people don't think about until they're really in the thick of an incident.
Absolutely right. I'd say a huge chunk of the response I was doing, it was an account was brute forced. Several years ago when ransomware was really budding, it was almost always remote desktop brute force. There
Yep.
were some other fun ones too, but how many times it was like, oh, that was an old admin account and completely forgot about it. Password was admin123. Those types of things are out there, and they are prevalent. Or maybe, oh, you know what, he spun up a dev instance in the cloud and didn't apply our standard security profile
Yeah.
to it and didn't get any tools. And now the threat actor's on there and they've got a jump box.
Yeah.
Those types of things really do happen a lot. And, like to your point around understanding the identity in the users and accounts, also being able to restrict that attack surface as well. So, we have a lot of customers where, hey, you know what, I have a legacy network that I can't really remove right now. Don't shame me, but it's Windows XP or sometimes worse. But what could we do to secure it? And so,
Yeah.
putting those conditional access policies and putting restrictions on, who and where they can be accessed from. Those can be really great ways to reduce the risk and likelihood of those types of compromises as well. So, yeah, really, really good point.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, network, a lot of times the whole asset management thing, right? Like we push, like a lot of folks in the security space, we talk about CIS because it's like one of the easiest frameworks for people to implement, because it's like one of the most actionable, in my opinion, that's out there. A lot of them are really like legal speak, pie in the sky kind of stuff when you're reading through those security requirements. But CIS, I think, does a great job of like making it actionable. You can read it as a MSP and figure out how to implement these controls. But like a lot of what they talk about is asset management, and people look at it, and of course we're all technicians and we're all technical people, so we're like, what tool can I buy to do asset management, right? But like there's so many tools you already have in your you know in your library of security tools that you can leverage for this. It's just, in my opinion, when you're doing incident response, when you're trying to figure out even when you're building your security program to understand the layout of your business or your customer's business, it's knowing where those libraries of resources are and understanding what an asset is. A lot of people look at assets as like a physical computer that they're sitting there with, a laptop, a desktop, whatever. But like identities are an asset, networks are an asset. Your SaaS tools are assets. Your third-party vendors you can consider as assets. Like having inventories of all those things really helps you understand what to protect. Because to your point, like I've been part of so many security incidents where it's like the bad guys are just looking for that one weakness in your defenses. So they'll do a network scan, they'll find that one old machine, they'll find that one device that's not running EDR that you didn't even know existed. So if you're just relying on one tool or one inventory, you can really get caught with some blind spots. So I think having a network discovery tool, having like a SaaS security tool like you guys provide, doing good third-party risk management, doing governance, having an privileged identity discovery and management tool like we offer, just like having all those layers and having it clearly documented so like, okay, for my customer, if I want to know what privileged accounts exist, I'm going to look here. If I want to know what end user accounts exist, I'm going to look there. What machine, like workstations in one spot, network information, like just having it documented is and starting somewhere, I think is better than waiting for the perfect tool that's utopia that brings all that information together for
I
you.
completely agree. I think that there would be a really interesting, modification to. There's a red team tool called Bloodhound. I don't know if anyone's heard of it, but essentially attackers use it when they land in a network, and it will tell them, okay, what is the fastest route for me to compromise systems to get to a service account or a domain admin account? And so it will tell you, jump to box number one, it's got this credential, jump to box number two, and now you're here. But I would love to see like a blue team version of that, where essentially when a system is compromised, you can get an idea of how important it is to respond to this quickly, because what, that system does contain sensitive credentials, or it's one hop away from those identities that are important. So I think that would be an interesting approach as well. But yeah, you absolutely have to know where those identities are. You have to know your vendors. You think about different tools. There was a large backup software. I don't like to name and shame anyone. Large backup software had a big RCE the other day for one of their softwares, and you could ask a bunch of IT technicians, oh, do you use this tool? And they may have to think about it, or they use so many different tools, they're not sure, and that means they don't know if they're impacted by this type of threat. So that's just one example. You have to know what your vendors are. You have to know what controls they're using to secure their networks as well. If you're going through any kind of SOC 2 or other types of compliance, often that vendor review and security review is going to be important in part of that process as well, just to make sure that you can have everything secure. But if you're giving a vendor a direct tunnel into your network and they have no security, well, you're kind of in a bad spot there too. So
Yeah.
definitely an interesting approach.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it's amazing how many people don't even ask questions for a lot of their third party vendors, So I mean, I think the you're only as strong as your weakest link when you're looking at a lot of this stuff, and it's really important, I think, too, like back to what you were saying with knowing like that server that's one hop away from the sensitive data, or that vendor that might have direct access, or even knowing where your data lives and what your where that criticality is for you and your customers, especially your customers if you're providing them a service. We all have a finite amount of time. I'm responsible for securing things inside of CyberQP. I've had to build programs out at other companies in the past, and the first thing I do is understand the business, right? Like you need to know what kind of sensitive data do we have? Where does it live? Is it separated from other things? Do we have the right controls in place? Who are the power users? Who are all the users that have access to the things that are important? And are they using their daily drivers, or are they using separate accounts? And can I monitor things in a way to make sure that these more sensitive systems are getting more attention from a security perspective? Because we can't obviously spend all of our time equal everywhere. But it's the same thing with your third party vendors, like which ones are critical, business critical, which ones have critical data, which ones have critical access, to your point, Aaron, right? And then applying more scrutiny to them. Maybe you have another vendor that's giving you like cheesy AI backgrounds, like the one I've got here, right? Like that one's not as critical. If it gets popped and someone gets my cheetah sock background, like I'm not going to lose sleep over it, right? But if someone pops my database with all my customer data in it, like that's a completely different story. So I think applying that business lens to make sure you're spending your time and effort and money in the right places is also another important part. So like understanding all those different asset types and then layering on that business lens, so you're prioritizing your more business critical and your sensitive data, I think is like a really good first step in starting to build a security program for yourself or your customers.
Yeah, agreed. And Todd put in the chat here, and I thought it was really interesting as well, and a very good point. In the defense in depth, part of that is CASB and understanding, where your data is and which cloud systems or tools that data is going to. Reviewing vendors' use of AI is absolutely critical as well. We've seen a number of very large vendor organizations chat and video
Yeah.
conferencing and lots of other ones out there kind of have some somewhat shady approaches to, hey, we're going to use your data for training, model training and things like that. So, you can opt out of these things in almost every situation, and, making sure that you're at least cognizant of it, because you put if you don't have a policy in place for use of AI or third-party tools like that, your users are going to do things that you may not want them to, and before you know it, they're dumping source code into Chat GPT, and who knows what happens after that. So same thing with like the Microsoft recall. I know there's a bunch of
Yeah.
concern around that right now too. So it's an evolving technology, and it's really interesting, and can probably provide a lot of cool functionality. But we have to be careful, and make sure that we put safeguards around these types of things until they are completely ironed out. Otherwise, yeah, your data might be used in ways that you never imagined or wanted it to.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I always use the adage with my friends or family when they ask about stuff like AI. I'm like, listen, if they're giving it to you for free, then you're paying with your privacy and data. So, so like if you're using a service out there that's free, just assume that your information's being helped to train that model. And there's ways that, you can use Copilot or other things where you can use the paid version where your data is only being trained on your company data and it's isolated from the large language model. Um, but like understanding that and making sure that you know when it's okay to use those free open ones for things like generating an image like this, or when it's not okay, like when you're writing critical parts of your source code for your product, right? Like there are two different use cases, and it goes back to, in my opinion, like a lot of the data governance stuff, right? Like as part of those compliance and governance rules, usually you've got a data classification policy and you've got like how to handle data. But honestly, even though it's AI and it's emerging and whatever, your data classification policy probably covers this already if you have one where it's like, hey, if it's sensitive, it's internal, you better make sure it's with a vetted vendor where you're sure where that data is going and how that data is being used, right? Like you can't just be using free stuff willy-nilly for sensitive uses.
Right. I think,
Um,
yeah, knowing your enemy and yeah, the MITRE ATT&CK framework. This is probably something that many of you have seen a lot. Um, and Brian, hope you don't mind. I'll just give a quick overview of this one.
Why not?
If you've never seen the MITRE ATT&CK framework, it's essentially a framework to help understand the different techniques and methods that a threat actor could use, or tactics and techniques to be concise, that a threat actor might use to further their goals once they compromise a network. So, as an example, we have reconnaissance here and credential access and discovery. So before they even completely compromise a network, they're going to likely do some reconnaissance. They're going to look at what targets they have, more information about that company. They might try to gain that initial access, but at a high level, the tactics at the top of these columns are essentially the main stages of an attack and how a threat actor might want to move from start to finish for a compromise. And then under that are all the different techniques which could be used. And so, for example, their privilege escalation under credential access, they might need to gain more access in this sense of compromising credentials or dumping passwords or using security keys. Privilege escalation is one of those techniques that can be used. So under the columns, each row is a technique that a threat actor might use to actually achieve that goal.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is a great framework. It's free. It's available on the internet, right? Like we can provide the links after the webinar for you folks. You can look at this at the high level across these different areas, like Aaron was describing. And there's also they have threat actor profiles in here as well that kind of help you understand who might be targeting you and what their tactics are. So like APT 29 is a good example where that's a threat actor group. MITRE has an attacker profile for it where they talk about the techniques that they use. When we use APT 29 for threat intel speak, right? Like most people glaze over and they're like, I don't know what that means, but for lay people, that's the threat actor group that attacked SolarWinds. So like that's the group that did the whole SolarWinds compromise that ruined a lot of people's day. Um, they're the group responsible for that. So like in this MITRE framework, you can go in there, they've got an attacker profile and you can look at that group and look at what tactics they use and what security controls you can put in place to help defend against an attack from that group. Um, so I think having something, having a good understanding and staying up to date with the security threats that are happening across the world. Back to that, you can't do everything all the time. Kind of security mentality, like focusing on those high impact areas, I think is important. So we talked about knowing your business, knowing what your assets are, where your risks are, where those crown jewels are in your customer or in your own business. The next layer of building a security program is knowing who's attacking you, who's targeting you, what's the most likely way that they're going to try to come after you, and making sure you're covering those common attack techniques. Um, there's lots of resources out there like CyberQP. We publish threat briefs where we take a lot of the open source information that's happening across the world, different attacks, different breaches, and we kind of like distill it down and try to provide an MSP lens on it so you guys all understand how this risk that might be in the news, like the MGM breach, how does that affect your day to day as an MSP? So it's really important to understand like what these tactics are that are being used against your peers and being used against your customers' peers. So then you can make sure that you're building the right defenses for your customers and for yourselves.
Yeah, and to add on to that, at a practitioner level, as Brian was saying, when you select one of these, privilege escalation or initial access, it will actually show you the technical details of all of the, maybe not all, but a solid list of the known methods to do so. So, downloading files from the internet. Okay, well, here are some tools that can do that, and here are the commands. So, on the defensive side of this, EDR and your security tooling should really be, using this or a similar framework to understand exactly what threat actors are doing. So, as an example, with Total, all of our alerts and what the MXDR team does to investigate, we map all of ours to the MITRE ATT&CK framework and build out visibility around that. So that way you can better understand, okay, well, is this threat actor potentially, very beginning of their stages, they just landed on a system because they phished someone, or are they already, zipping up and exfiltrating terabytes of data to mega upload, and they're right about to drop your ransom note? Are those the types of things? So
Yep.
framework doesn't always point it out as easy as that, but with the skilled eye and skilled investigators, we can help triage and understand exactly where that's at. It's definitely helpful.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think having a vendor that helps you guys understand that like you guys do is critical, right? Like you want to know how far along that journey that attack is when you see that alert. Is it something where like I should be pulling the fire alarm and sending all the bells and whistles like this is a problem, or is it or is it someone just probing, or is it someone that's like just got an initial foothold on one system and we can just isolate that host and do our thing? Or is this a full-blown incident that we need to respond to? So understanding that framework really helps you guys understand how to respond to these threats and how to and how far along that attack is. Because back to that defense in depth, like those bad guys might be good at stepping over your tripwires along the way, even with defense in depth, and like eventually they trip on something, and you want to know how far have they gotten, how much information do they have, and that the MITRE ATT&CK framework really helps you understand the process that the attackers go through. um, Great. Yeah. So I know one thing we talked about a bit in the beginning of this was like kind of tying, I think it'd be good to tie that defense in depth back to that framework, Aaron. So I know when you did your presentation, a lot of what people don't understand is like the attacker mindset and how these attackers work. A lot of people still think that it's like a hacker in their mom's basement, like cranking away on a computer. They don't realize this is I think I forget what the latest numbers were. It's like an $8 billion or $8 trillion a year industry, right? They're making, I forget what the exact number is, but like this is big business, right?
Yeah, this is absolutely big business. This has become, a well-oiled machine for the threat actors. There is, different organizational structures. Part of the talk I gave at Right a Boom, I was talking about how, these threat groups, they used to be, you had to specialize in everything. You had to be able to break into the network and then escalate your privileges and steal data and then handle the ransom and the negotiation piece. Yeah, as a threat actor, you had to do everything. But now they've, built up business models where, one team is the one breaking in and then they hand the data off to the next. And it's unfortunate, but it's the reality of the situation. And if you ever find yourself in the ransomware negotiation phase, you'll find, dozens of times I'll throw out a counter offer or something, and they say, "Oh, I have to go talk to management. I have to go get approval before I can, do this."
Yeah.
Or sometimes it'll be the person in a ransomware as a service where they're basically offering a platform for ransomware. You start doing a negotiation and the person's just belligerent or isn't interested in actually resolving this. So you go and talk to an admin You go and go to a special channel, and you basically go to their boss and say, "Look, we're trying to resolve this. Can you step in and fix this for us?" Yeah, the business model is there, and unfortunately, it's incredibly profitable for them. So, we need to be able to treat it as such, and realize that, it's not about securing every aspect of everything and being bulletproof. It's about making yourself and your organizations more buttoned up and more secure than the other ones out there, right? The threat actors are not going to burn 0 days and do all this crazy stuff for, a low payout. They're just looking for easy, compromise and organizations that they can get to as easy as possible. So if yours is, fairly secure and you've got a good plan in place, chances are they're just going to move on to the next target.
Yep. Yeah, no, I agree completely. I mean, it's crazy. A lot of it is like when I talk to a lot of MSPs, I'll compare it to their businesses where it's like, you might start out with one or two techs, just like the threat actors did, that have to do everything. But then as they grow and they're making more money and it's a bigger company now, or a bigger threat group, then they start specializing, where you've got your tier one people that are just like knocking on doors, jiggling handles in the parking lot, right? Like at the grocery store, like there's people who that's their job. They go around looking for low-hanging fruit, looking for open SSH, open RDP, looking at password dumps, like just doing basic recon, seeing what they can get for information from folks and getting those credentials and getting access to a host. And once they have access to that one host, they're literally like writing up a ticket going, "Hey, Aaron, I've got access to this company. Here's the information, how big they are, what my credentials I got access to, what the machine is, blah, 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 blah." They send that ticket over to the level two, who in this scenario could be Aaron. And then the level two comes in, they're like, "All right, I specialize in spreading," right? Like having ransomware on one computer isn't going to put food on the bad guy's table, right? They need to spread to your entire customer or multiple customers. So they'll escalate to a more skilled level two. I've been on incidents where you see that initial foothold, and then sometimes it takes weeks where you're like, "Oh, they must have a backlog." And the level two comes in and starts, doing additional network scans, maybe doing some custom living off the land scripts and stuff like that to really get an idea of how broad they can spread their attack. But most of the time, their goal is to stay as quiet as possible. They don't want you to see on like that you're on that network until they've got that privileged credential that they can use across the entire environment. They've got a mapping of all the hosts in that environment from a network perspective. So like having those tripwires on the network side and the identity side are important, because like by the time you get a trigger that ransomware has been installed, like I'm sorry, but it's already mostly over for you.
Yeah, I get on calls a lot, prospects and things like that, and they say, "Oh, well, do you prevent ransomware? What does it do with this ransomware?" And I was like, "Okay, well, yeah, our EDR is a great model. It's going to, stop the execution of that. But the reality is, if you got to the point where they're launching their encryption, there should have been, dozens of other alarm bells that had triggered prior to that. You may not have noticed them. You may not have the logging to see it, but, in a proper environment, you should be seeing a lot of those steps prior to that. And if not, you should be, reevaluating your security tooling and procedures.
Yeah.
Because the ransomware silver bullet, the blocking the binary itself, that's fine. But you know what? There's a lot of systems out there, dev environment or whatever it might be, that they don't have those security controls and they're just as easily encrypted. So yeah, trying to make sure that is definitely intriguing.
Nice. I see we got a question here from Mark about how the tools work together. So for this webinar, we're more just kind of trying to educate on like the threat landscape out there and security controls. So it's less about the technologies. We're not really doing a demo as part of this webinar. It's more talking about how having tools outside of some of the standard security tooling to give you that defense in depth is important to set up those tripwires, make your attack surface smaller, making it harder for bad guys to compromise your systems.
Yeah, and we are happy, down the road, if you reach out, we can definitely show you a demo or kind of kick the tires a little bit and let you see exactly how that works. But yeah, we wanted to kind of keep it conversational today and really just kind of highlight some of the top things, or the things that we feel are top of mind for a lot of organizations out there.
Yep. Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why we collaborated on this is because there's not a lot of vendors in the MSP space that are really looking at the security depth like CyberQP and in total are with the different security components and the different layers that we help you add to reduce that attack surface. So yeah, at the end of the call, we've got some QR codes, or at the end of the webinar, where you guys can book a demo and get a full overview of what each product offers. I know our folks are really good at showing all those different things like we've talked about in this call. On my side, we've got that privileged access discovery, limiting your daily driver. That's the biggest thing. A lot of folks don't a lot of people are still using daily drivers for admin access. That account that they're surfing the email or their web or the web with is the same one they're using for privileged access, or they're using shared accounts. Like there's nothing a ransomware actor loves more, or a bad guy loves more, than dumping memory off of a machine and going, oh, here's the shared password that's used across this entire customer base, right? So we really help you guys limit that attack surface so you can use just-in-time accounts with passwordless, which is a phishing-resistant MFA method to gain access, so your techs can do admin access without leaving that system exposed when they don't need the access. And then Aaron, I'll let you do your plug. I know you guys have a lot of layers as well that I don't see as common in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Our goal is really, approaching it as a modular security platform, understanding that as an MSP, you have different customers with different needs. We offer a lot of things such as, EDR for the malware detection and prevention, but also SASE for controlling that network access. So all your users will be routed through secure DNS and malware scanning and things of that nature. But also the key aspect is around visibility and logging, right? So not only are we gathering all the endpoint logs, but we have integrations for your Office 365, your Google Workspace, your firewalls, Azure, whatever it might be, to bring all that data into one SIM in one location. So that way you can know what's going on and build those dashboards and reports. Or we also have our managed security service, the MXDR team, so they can investigate all the different alerts that come in on your behalf to act as an extension of your security team, because we know a lot of MSPs, they don't have a security team, or the one person that's doing security is also doing 10 other things. So we can be an extension of that team and help. So our goal is to really provide that visibility and awareness around what's happening across all of your tool sets to give you that comprehensive view.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I think it's great. And that's one of the reasons why we did this partnership here, is because it layering all these things together makes it exponentially more difficult for the attackers to get onto your network. We have one interesting question in here for you, Aaron. I think this is a good one for you based on what you guys do. What would you say to someone who believes they are okay on security when they just use Google Workspace?
Yeah, we have organizations of all kinds and sizes. Some of them have no endpoints and they're just using cloud apps and things like that. I hear a lot, unfortunately, that, oh, we have MFA or multi-factor authentication, so on our email, so we're good to go. There's nothing else needed. But the reality is there's a lot of things that can happen. There's a lot of different attacks out there, including phishing attacks that can harvest that MFA token or session data and kind of bypass that multi-factor authentication. So, while it's a good step in the right direction, there are a lot of other things that you can be doing. For example, logging all of that data. So I was talking about the platform, being able to know all of the access and all of the things that are occurring beyond just the logins. So, is an inbox rule being created to move, emails that contain certain words like accounts payable? Are they trying to hide those emails? Is delegation of mailbox rights happening where somebody might be in the email and they're trying to access other mailboxes? There are a lot of things that you can do to better understand what's happening with your Google Workspace as well. Doesn't matter really any email platform, but you have to know what's happening and you have to be able to have the logs before you can really alert and feel confident that you're secure around it.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think back to what we were talking about earlier too, with that whole like left a boom, right a boom too. Like technology is great, but having the people and processes behind it as well is important. So like just saying, oh, I turned on the spam filtering in Google Workspace, or I turned on MFA, like that's not going to help you if someone gets their credentials compromised. Like you still need to have a plan in place for like, how are you going to respond? How are you going to make sure that attack doesn't become more than just like that one account getting compromised. Back to not using the daily drivers too, like I was saying, right? Like that's another common thing I've seen in security incidents in the past is like the bad guys, they can go on LinkedIn, they can see who your technicians are, they can see who your admins, your security people are, and they'll target them with phishing accounts, phishing campaigns, get access to their accounts. And I've literally seen them initially compromise the security tool and just silence alerts as they trigger. They just log in as the security administrator and just sit there and go, nope, we didn't do all this activity, and just clear out that alert queue. So I mean, that's why layering things is so important, right? You want to know when that phishing email lands. You want to make sure you're protecting those accounts proactively. There's a lot that goes into a full security program outside of just technologies or like one tool to solve everything. Cool. Another thing we talked about in here is like understanding where you are on the security journey, right, Aaron? So I think one thing that I don't want people to take away from this webinar is like, oh my gosh, like I have so much to do. I don't even know where to start and I can't do anything. That's such a common, you get that like analysis paralysis, right? Where it's like, hey, how do I do all this and what am I going to do? What do you have any recommendations around that? Like, where would you start?
Yeah, and everybody has to start somewhere, unless you're jumping into a giant organization that's been, well established in security. Like everybody has to pick up and decide where to begin. I personally think that it's best to begin by looking at those cybersecurity frameworks and figuring out which one is most applicable to your organization. Either for regulatory reasons or whatever it might fit your organization and your customers as well. And then starting there and then looking at where can I get the biggest bang for my buck? What can I do to reduce the most risk with the least amount of effort? And then slowly start chipping away at it. You're not going to start from zero and go to 100 overnight, but there are things that you can do in almost any framework that are going to give you a big bump, and really help you become more secure, but also show that progress that you're working towards a more secure company as well. So just being able to track that progress and see over time. 6 months ago we didn't have X, Y, and Z in place, and now we've implemented those. It's still a long way out. We might be another year or two before we're completely where we want to be. But that's kind of how I like to do it, is to start out with a framework and then build tools and process around it. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can go. What do you think, Brian?
No, I agree completely. I think even, I've worked at organizations where we have, $100 million cybersecurity budget. And even with $100 million and hundreds of people to implement that security, like you're never going to go from 0 to 100. And you're never going to check a box that says you're done. So I think it's that whole progress over perfection, I think, is the mindset you need to get into when you're building your security program. Like you were saying, it's like focus on those high impact areas at first, and then like using the information we shared today around like knowing your enemy, knowing your assets, knowing your inventory, knowing what your business risks are, your customers' business risks are, right? Like it's a journey to get from point A to point B, and it doesn't really end, right? It's not like once you get to point B, then you're looking at the next thing because the attackers are always changing their tactics based on where you're building your strength, right? Like if you're really strong in one area, they're going to try to get you somewhere else. So it's a moving target. You really got to keep on top of things and just be okay with progression and getting things better over time and knowing you're focusing on high impact areas.
Yeah, and to the point of kind of this or the theme of this webinar as well is, collaboration. Ask your peers, ask other organizations that are similar to you, ask the security vendors that you're considering partnering with. What do they do to help secure organizations of your size? There's a huge community in security, and you have a lot of resources available to not have to do it alone. So yeah, definitely leverage those whenever possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the areas, honestly, that I think is like has the most opportunity in the MSP space is like I know coming from big financial companies, like we would literally share intelligence with our competition on the security side where we'd say, hey, we got this really bad phishing email last week or like today, or we saw this ransomware attempt, or we saw this account takeover or this fraud or whatever. And we would openly share that information with our peers because at the end of the day, we're all in the same team, right? Like there's the whole sales, marketing, trying to make your business bigger piece, but like when it comes to securing your business and your customers, that if we're all in silos and not working together, we're making it easier for the bad guys at the end of the day, right? So
Agreed.
yeah. Awesome. So I know we'll leave some time. I know there were some questions that were coming along the way here. We appreciate you folks that have asked questions as well. Like, thank you for being engaged throughout this. Um, we did release some joint blogs prior to the webinar as well, which we'll be providing links to after the webinar to everyone that registered. So you'll receive those. I know they had shared those QR codes as well for a few minutes there where you can book a demo. You know, that would be the next step if you guys want to see again as far as that progress over perfection goes. I know both of our technology stacks let you get started, you know, take baby steps. You know, you can get started, do the discovery, get some initial stuff in place, and then all the way up to a very mature program, you know, whether it's having an XDR capability with Aaron's group, or whether it's using passwordless just-in-time accounts with CyberQP. Like, you can work towards those end goals to make it harder for the bad guys to get access to your systems, but like booking a demo is where you would start, right? Like start somewhere, get that make sure you're filling those gaps where and understanding where your weaknesses are, because the bad guys will find them if they're there. Cool. So I know we're getting close to time here. Do we want to open it up to any Q&A? I mean, I don't think the folks on the call have been shy up till now, so there might not be a lot of questions at the end here, but we're happy to ask any or answer anything specific folks have.
Brian, there's that one question there from Todd. How is CyberQP going to adapt to organizations that don't want bring your own device in their org for verification of employees?
Yeah, so I mean, for identity verification, we do offer multiple methods. So a lot depends on your customer, and that's why we offer all the different ways. And just like with MFA, there's different strengths to the different verification methods that we offer. So, you know, we've got SMS, we've got email, we have our mobile app as well. So the mobile app would be the most secure, which would be the one that I would recommend because we're doing biometrics for that verification. So it's really good, and we're doing a number in there as well, a number match to make it phishing resistant. So that's the most secure, but it also doesn't fit every customer, which is why we provide all those different options, right? Like if you've got someone who's not technically savvy enough to use a mobile device in that way, or if you've got people who are regulated that aren't allowed to use their mobile device in the workspace, then sometimes you have to lean on that SMS verification or that email verification method to as depending on what your customers and what the use case is for that customer. So we try to offer multiple ways for folks to do it, for you to engage your customers. But it's really up to you guys on how you want to implement it with your customers based on their risk appetite and what their internal policies are. But I know we didn't talk about the identity verification part too much here. It was mostly talking about privileged access management, but you know, identity verification is one of those things that I see becoming table stakes in the coming years. I know HHS just we did a blog on it. They released an advisory for anyone who's supporting healthcare companies, saying that you should be requiring identity verification for anyone calling in to do support calls, like if they're calling your help desk or they're calling you as an MSP. And typically what I've seen in the past with these advisories from HHS is like a lot of times those advisories get folded into the next update of PCI that comes out, or not PCI, of HIPAA that comes out when they're looking at like the security requirements. I would anticipate that becoming a security requirement going forward. Again, they're looking for the path of least resistance, and a lot of times the humans are the path of least resistance. So
Social engineering is still popular.
yep, it's always been there and it'll always be there. Especially in the age of AI, it gets even easier, right? Like I know a guy on my team, we did a little demo to the internal team with a little quick video him pretending to be me so he could get my password reset, and it's pretty easy now. A little tweaking, you can make it pretty realistic.
Yeah, we'll definitely see more of that.
Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for your time today. I don't have anything else to add. Is there anything you want to add on here, Aaron, or you think we're good?
I think we're good. Yeah, really appreciate everyone's time today, and yeah, feel free to reach out to us, using those codes or directly if you have any questions or want more detail. And yeah, really great talking with you today, Brian.
Yeah, you as well, Aaron. Thank you. It was great doing this webinar together, and hopefully we get good feedback on it. I'd love to try to dive into some of the details on some of these attacks and stuff down the road. I think it's really interesting to me, and I think showing people how some of these things can flow really opens a lot of eyes.
Sure, would love it. Perfect.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Hope you have a good rest of your week.
Thank you all. Have a great day.